In this video, I'm going to be demonstrating how to create this planet illustration in Photoshop. We're going to use some layer styles and layer blending effects, as well as some textures brought in from the internet. So I'm going to show the entire thing step by step, how to create this entire image. So with that said, let's just start. I'm going to start with a new document. In this case, I'm going to make it 4,000 pixels wide, 2,000 pixels tall. Um, Technically, you can pick any size you want, but I like this. This is a nice sort of cinematic looking image size. Um, if you like, actually, when you create the new document, you can go ahead and set the background color to black right here, and that will start you off with a black background in your image. So quite simply here, what I'm going to do is um, start with a circle. Basically, I'm going to use a hard. I'm going to use the brush tool, and I have the brush tool set to 100% hardness, and I'm going to make a planet here that is, let's see, about 1,000 pixels. So I will use a 1,000 pixel size brush to just create a circle. You can really make this any color you want. It's important to make sure that the opacity of your brush up here at the top and the flow are both at 100%, and that your brush hardness is set to 100%. All right, so basically I'm going to make a dot, just a circle. You can make a circle really any way you want, but I think the easiest way is literally just take a brush and just make a circle, make a dot. It just has to be filled in so that you have a layer that just has a solid circle, and that's it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to apply some layer styles to give it the 3D look. So what I'm going to do here is double click on the layer, and that pops open my layer style dialog box here. The basic idea with the layer styles is what I'm trying to do is give this thing a 3D effect. So there's a few layer styles that work really well for this. I'm going to do a gradient overlay. All right, and when you do the gradient overlay, you want to make sure it's set to radial mode. Radial mode is going to give you this sort of circular shaped gradient. You can adjust the size of the gradient to give you sort of a different sized highlight area if you like. And you can also click and drag around um, the actual effect in your actual document while you have this box open. So as I move this around, you can see the sort of spherical 3D effect that you get. I like to just give it a slightly off center kind of look, sort of like that. I think that looks pretty good for a planet. But obviously you can tweak it to any um, any look that you're going for. I also like to throw on a outer, excuse me, a outer glow. For an outer glow, I like to put on a color that is similar to the color that's used in your planet, so that it sort of gives it this sort of I don't know, kind of an atmospheric sort of effect. It gives it this sort of soft kind of glowing effect. Um, the size here is the biggest, um, probably the single biggest factor in how this glow looks, and then also the opacity. So we can tone down the effect to make it more subtle, increase or decrease the size to give it, um, just exactly the look that you want. I also like to put a stroke on the edge. This kind of gives it a look of almost like an atmosphere sort of around the edge. If you take that opacity and drop it down a little bit, it gives you this nice little edge to your glow that kind of makes it look like your planet has kind of an atmosphere around it, if that's the kind of look that you want. Of course, you can pick any color, any style, something that contrasts with your planet nicely, but still looks like it belongs there. I'll try something like that for the moment. And then I like to do also a inner shadow. So the inner shadow is going to be a pretty distinct edge. You can adjust the angle so that the angle of your shadow corresponds with the angle of the light that you did earlier using your gradient. Um, and I certainly don't want this red color here, so I'm going to go for kind of a dark blue shadow color. I don't want to go completely black. I like to sort of pick up a little bit of the color that's in the planet, just makes it a little bit more visually interesting. It's probably going to look black in my video, but on the real image, you can just get a slight hint of a bluish tone there. So I'm just going to tweak the angle like so. So that's a pretty good 3D um, style for your planet. Now, all of these effects can be tweaked really endlessly. You can alter these as much as you want. You can make your shadow bolder or less bold. You can make the shadow larger so that it covers a larger part of the planet if you want sort of an eclipse kind of effect. You could also blur the shadow using the size setting here. Personally, I like kind of a crisp looking shadow. And in this case, I don't really want a super um, dramatic sort of eclipse look. So I'm just going to give it a slight darker edge just like that. And that's it. That's my 3D effect for my planet. I think it's pretty convincing, and it gives us a really good starting point to build up the rest of the image. So I want to incorporate some sort of a texture here on my planet. So this is my finished example. Um, to get that look is really simple, and it's just such a shockingly effective technique. I really love it. So I like to use this site, textureking.com. This is a great site for some free textures that you can use in different projects. They have lots of different. I mean, they don't have that many images, but it's enough for our purposes for this. Um, it's kind of shocking what an amazing and realistic looking planet image you can make, or a moon or whatever sort of effect you want using some of these natural, earth-based textures. So this is like a rusty piece of metal. You can go for things like um, dirt and sand. This is picture. These are things like pebbles and sand and things like that can be a good effect. I kind of like the look of something that has some different colors in it, and also is sort of like chunky looking. It almost looks like continents or clouds. But you honestly, you really can't go wrong. You just have to grab one of these and just kind of see what it looks like. I'm going to, for the moment, I'm just going to go for this one and see how that works. So I'm going to click the image to open a large size. But you can also use Google Images for this. If I just wanted to Google this, I can do a quick um, image search, something like, say, get rid of that, say like ice texture, and any of these really could be a really interesting starting point for a planet. And one of the great things about this technique is you don't really need a whole lot of detail for it to look really good in our image. So any of these kind of textures really could work well, or even any of your own photographs if you want to take your own pictures. This one's pretty cool. That might actually be pretty great for what we're doing here. That's sort of a ice crystal sort of image. But for the moment, I'm just going to use one of these on Texture King. I actually don't want to use this one. I'm gonna grab this one right here. So just click on the image to open it up in the large size, and then I'm just going to right click to copy the image. So I just choose, oops, I can also save it, but I'm just going to do copy image, and then back over to Photoshop, and I'm just going to paste it in. So Control V or Command V on a Mac. So that is going to paste your texture onto a new layer. So at the moment, this texture is free floating. and it's above my planet layer. But what I want is I want this texture to appear inside my planet. So if you take a look at the layers over here on the right, um, the texture layer is above the planet layer. That's really important. And then what you're going to do is right click on the texture layer and simply choose Create Clipping Mask. And what this does is it puts the top layer effectively inside the other layer, and you can immediately see how cool that looks. Um, I mean, this is literally just like some kind of a rusty, um, I don't know, a brake rotor or something, but it really does look quite, uh, you know, fantastic as a texture for a planet. It's really amazing. Um, if you don't like how it fits or if it doesn't look good, you can move it around. You can push Control T or Command T to resize it if you like. If you need to stretch it to fit a certain area or smush it down, and you can also rotate it. So I don't really like this line that's kind of going right through the middle of this. So I'm just going to strategically position my texture here so that um, the line is sort of not really a factor in the design. So I'm kind of just go a little bit bigger, and that looks pretty good like that. I'll take that. Now, one of the problem here is that this texture now is completely covered my original um, choice of color. So I had this kind of greenish, kind of Neptune kind of color. I don't know exactly what color Neptune is, but so I kind of want to see that original color, but I want to get this texture. So I'm gonna adjust the blending up here at the top of my layers. Um, this is not an exact science. You don't necessarily need to know exactly which one of these is going to work for your needs. You can just go through the different options and just kind of see how it looks. So in this case, a lot of times overlay or soft light or hard light will be pretty good. I'm kind of thinking that hard light looks pretty good, and kind of tweak this, move it around a little bit, and just get exactly the look that I want. And I think that looks pretty good. So I've got this cool looking planet now. It has an interesting texture and it's got a cool glowing effect. Of course, I could always go back into my layer styles here and tweak it if I like. If I want to adjust any of my colors, any of the settings that I used, maybe I want more of a blue stroke. I think that looks better. I can adjust my gradients. I can adjust my glow color. Um, Maybe more of a orangish reddish color might be better. As you can see, this is not an exact science. It's kind of a matter of playing with the effect until you like the way that it looks. But I think that looks pretty decent for such a quick attempt. But of course, if I want, I could try different textures. I could try different settings. It could all be tweaked quite a bit. So I'm pretty happy with that as a planet, but I want to add some other details to it. So my example image here, I have a lot of other cool stuff going on. I've got a sort of a comet striking the planet. I've got some rings going around the outside of the planet, and then I've got a starry background with kind of a nebula looking um, kind of texture back there. So I'm going to go through those really quick and just demonstrate how I did those. All of them are fairly simple, and I think they really can add a lot to your illustration. So let's do the rings first. So first thing I want to do is just create a new layer. Generally, whenever I'm doing something in Photoshop, I want it to be on its own layer. I'm actually, now that I'm looking at this more, I'm not really crazy about this glow color. So I'm just going to brighten that up. I'm going to put like a nice white glow on it, something a little bit more like that. I think that's better. But the great thing about using this technique is, with the exception of the texture here, each of these things is generated in Photoshop and can be tweaked as much as you want. So I can change any of these colors, any of the sizes really easily at any point. And it's very, very efficient because I can make my changes anytime without messing up anything else that I've already done. The texture is, a bitmap image. It's made of actual pixels, so I can't change that as easily. But obviously, I can always paste in a different texture if I'm not happy with this one. So let's do some rings. So my go-to technique for rings uses a shape tool. So in this case, I'm going to use the ellipse tool, and I want to make sure that up here at the top, my options are set to create a path rather than a shape or pixels. I want to create a path. And what I'm going to do is draw out the shape that I want my rings to take. Something like that is pretty good. And I'm then going to use my brush tool to stroke that path and give me the rings that I want. I've got a kind of a little trick that works really well for this, and so I'm going to demonstrate how to do that. So this is my paths palette right here. Normally it lives down here next to your layers. I'm just going to pop it up here so that we can see it at the same time as my layers palette. So here's my layers and here's my paths. So my path here, if I grab a brush tool like so, and click the stroke path button, which is this button right here, it will outline that path with the brush that I've selected. Okay, so obviously that looks terrible. That's not at all what I want. Whatever size and settings you choose for your brush is exactly what is going to be used to stroke the path. So if I use a smaller brush, it will create a thinner uh, ring shape. Okay. If I lower the opacity, it will stroke that path with a lower opacity brush, which is very useful. And any other changes that I make to my brush will be reflected in the way that shape looks. So what I like to do here, this is a simple little trick, but is really effective. So if I just stroke the path, it looks like that, and that's okay. But it doesn't really look the way that rings look on planets. Um, if you look at a picture of Saturn's rings, or really if you just hold any ringed object, you'll see that the ring is not the same thickness all the way through. So you're going to see wider areas on the sides, and it's going to look narrower at the front. So the way that we can create that effect is really simple. If you just open up your brush settings up here at the top, and you turn your brush horizontally, and then squish it so that it is kind of a long, skinny shape. So if I draw with this brush, it looks like this. Vertical lines are going to be wider, and horizontal lines will be skinny like that. Okay, so now if I stroke that path with that brush, you'll see it will look like that. And that's exactly the shape that I want for my rings. So what I'm going to do here, this is a really handy little trick here. I'm going to uh, set my opacity to my brush around like 25% or so. Um, and then I'm going to stroke that path just once. And then I'm going to actually open my brush menu here. I notice my spacing is kind of high. So you're getting that sort of dot effect. I don't want that at all. I'm going to turn the spacing all the way down so I get a nice smooth line. So when I stroke the path now, you'll see that it gives me this interesting shape like this that gets wider and then gets skinnier and then gets wider again on the sides. I'm going to actually make it even a little bit more dramatic, and I'll try it again. So if I stroke it, it looks like that. All right, now a fun thing I can do really easily is if I make my brush a little bit smaller and do it again, it adds another layer. And if I make it smaller and do it again, you end up with a series of overlapping but concentric rings that looks pretty darn convincing. And you get this nice sort of stacked ring effect where it looks like the rings are building up on top of each other. You can also do this with different colors. You can do it with different types of brushes. Some brushes that have a little noise in them can be kind of fun. Some brushes that have some variation. You know, you can. There's really no limit to how you do this, but I like the effect as it is right now. Obviously, the ring is covering the front of my planet here, and that should not be the case. Easiest way to fix this is just with the eraser. I could also put a layer mask. That's probably a better technique, but I'll just use the eraser for the moment. And I'm just going to erase the part that should be behind the planet. And just like that, I now have a pretty cool looking planetary ring system, just like that. A lot of things I can do to tweak this. If I want to change the colors, Command U is a nice shortcut. I can change the color at any time. Um, you can duplicate the layer and apply different blending styles to it. There's really, it's really limitless, and it's a really fun sort of, it's a fun little technique that you can play with a lot and get lots of different kinds of results. If you like, you can hit Command T and rotate it to any position that you like. I think it looks a little more interesting if the rings aren't just perfectly straight. So I'll just give it a little bit of a tilt like that. So there's my planet with rings. The next thing I want to do is add the stars in the background. Stars are a really important thing for any space-based image, obviously. And in this case, I want to create something original. I could just copy a picture from the internet and paste it in there, but it's always better if you can make something original and do it ourselves and not just copy something that someone else has already done. So I have this really handy effect for creating stars, and I really like how this effect works. So here's how it works. So I'm just going to work directly on the background in this case. I could do a new layer if I wanted to, but I'm just going to do the background for right now. And it needs to be black. So you have to start with a black background. And I want to make sure that my colors here are set to black and white. And then I'm going to simply hit filter. I'm going to choose render. Or excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm going to choose noise. And I'm going to click add noise. All right. And what this is going to do is just randomly generate a series of black and white dots all over everything. I want to make sure that this is set to monochromatic, otherwise it's going to give me colored dots. So I have this set to monochromatic. And then you can either choose uniform or Gaussian. I like the Gaussian effect. It makes it a little bit more uneven, a little bit more unpredictable. I don't want, a perfectly even star field. I kind of want some variation in there. So what this has done now is it created this tiny little pattern of black and white dots. It doesn't really look like stars. It just looks like noise on an old television or static, something like that. So that doesn't work for my effect, but I'm gonna tweak it a little bit. Once you understand what you're working with, Photoshop makes it really easy to adjust this to get just the look that you want. So I'm gonna go up here to my filter menu, and I'm gonna I want to get some more gray tones in there. So the way that you do that is by choosing blur, and I'm just going to hit blur more. And what that's going to do, it's going to apply a blurring effect to all those black and white dots. You can do it a couple times if you like. Doesn't really matter, but I have here now that noisy kind of background, but there's a lot of gray tones in there. So now I have black, white, and gray. Okay, so to make my stars look a little bit more convincing, I'm going to go to the image menu, and I'm going to do adjustments and levels. I could also push Control L. Right, so here's my levels, and it gives me this box right here. This is used for controlling the black and white areas of a particular layer. In this case, what I want to do is pull this black point over to the right, and you'll see what happens. It immediately eliminates a lot of those gray tones that were in the image. And then I'm going to pull my white point over to the left. And what I'm doing now is I'm setting the overall brightness of the brightest parts of the image. So the farther I push the white point over, the brighter the stars become. The farther I push the left point over, the fewer stars I will have. So you can control the exact number of stars that you have by adjusting how close together these 2 points are. Sometimes it can be helpful to go ahead and hit OK. It will apply the effect. And I'm not crazy about it. This is too many stars. Doesn't really look very convincing yet. Um, so I'm going to do that one more time. So I'm just going to do filter, blur more. That's going to give me those gray tones again. Maybe do it twice, and then image, adjustments, levels. And then once again, it gives me that levels adjustment. And now I can really fine tune that effect to get just exactly the look that I want and the number of stars that I want to appear in my final image. And so just like that, I now have a pretty convincing, I think, um, kind of galaxy looking thing in the background. Uh, if you want, you can draw in your own stars. If you really want to get creative here, you can just, whoops, didn't mean to do that. You can just grab a brush tool and throw in a few um, brighter stars here and there if you like. Um, you don't have to have, you want a little bit more variation in your image. So maybe, pick a few different colors, throw a few different colored shapes there in the background just for fun. Um, and that looks pretty cool. Um, so this is looking pretty good. In my original image that I created, I also made a kind of nebula effect there in the background. This is a really, really easy effect that I used just by using clouds from the internet. So I went online and did a search for clouds. And lots of different types of clouds can work really well for this. Um, I like these particular ones. They're pretty funky looking, and I think this works really well for like a nebula effect. Um, but also something like this could work well. You're basically looking for something that kind of looks sort of spacey is the idea. Um, Obviously, this image has a big tree in it, which doesn't really help. Um, but maybe something like that might be good. Let's give it a try. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it. All right. So copy and paste. So there is my cloud image. Now, obviously, I don't want it to look like this. So what I'm going to do is I press Command T just so I can stretch it out, and I want it to fill in the entire image. Okay. Um, and then this is where the magic of those Photoshop blending modes comes in. As I go through these different modes, you'll begin to see um, the the black and the stars shining through in differing amounts. Um, so there's a number of techniques I can use to get just exactly the look that I want here. Um, I'm going to go for I want to be able to see the colors at the moment, so I'm going to go with this hard light setting. Um, Ultimately, this is not exactly the look that I want, so I'm going to tweak this again a little bit. Um, some basic things I can do. Obviously, I can lower the opacity of the layer. That's a really easy way to just create a subtle effect. That looks pretty good, honestly, just like that. I'm pretty happy with that. Um, but I could also open up my levels adjustment. So I can do image adjustment levels. Um, and I can play with the black and white points, just like I did with my stars earlier, to really get a fine-tuned control of exactly how this image is going to look and how those colors are going to interact in that background. So that combined with um, tweaking this opacity here can give me a pretty interesting looking nebula formation. I think that looks pretty good. Um, if I'm not into the colors, you can always change the colors. Um, you can simply go to your adjustments and do a hue saturation adjustment. That's a really easy way to do it. Tweak the hue, and you can give yourself any kind of a nebula color that you like. So maybe a pink color might be cool, or purple. Um, really whatever you want. You can also take multiple texture layers and build them on top of each other. So let's say I like this. If it's a really small image, let's find good one that has some cool texture to it. That one's pretty cool. So I'm going to copy this and paste it in. And there I now have two cloud layers on top of each other. Now, tweaking my blending settings here, uh, you can get some really interesting and unexpected kind of effects. When these layers start stacking on top of each other and blending together, that's when the really cool things start to happen, and it becomes kind of unpredictable exactly what it's going to look like. But honestly, that's a big part of the fun. When you stack these layers and start using them um, in new and creative ways, uh, it, it it really becomes an original creation. It really doesn't really have anything to do with the original image at this point. I'm just creating something that's entirely new, entirely different, and entirely my own. So um, I'm going to just lower my opacity here a little bit. And now I've got a pretty cool looking nebula kind of background. So again, this is my original image that I used. As you can see, it looks pretty different, but I use different clouds, I use different colors. So this can be different every single time. And you never know exactly what the effect is going to be until you try it. So I've got my planet, I've got my background. Let's do the meteor effect. This could also be a comet if you like. Um, I'm gonna simply create a new layer. I'm gonna grab my brush. I'm gonna set it to white as my color, and I'm gonna just make a little dot, just like that, on a brand new layer. Opacity 100%. Try it again. Um, so I've got this little white dot here. Now what can I do with this white dot? Uh, because it's just white. There's no other shades in it. Um, it doesn't really look all that interesting at the moment, but we can fix that. So if I want to give it a comet effect, I can simply use my smudge tool here and grab um, my dot here, and I'm just gonna stretch it off to one side. Um, your strength setting up here will determine how long it stretches out that shape. And I'll probably will end up going over it several times to get exactly the effect that I want. But that looks decent. Um, Sometimes I like to grab the brush again and then go back and uh, kind of reestablish that front part of my object here. Maybe smudge it a couple more times. So I'm kind of like drawing and then smudging, drawing and then smudging to get just the look that I want. Um, you can kind of tweak the shape of the tail here if you like. You can put a little wiggle into the tail if you want. You can make it longer, shorter, really whatever you like. Personally, I just think a good straight um, tail I think probably looks best. Um, I can now move this thing around. Uh, Obviously, I can shrink it down, make it any size that I want. This can be far in the background or um, directly, smashing into my planet like I did it on my original. Um, in my example image, I added a couple of other effects to this to make it look a little bit more exciting. So if you double click on your layer, pop open your layer style here, um, what I did on my example was an outer glow. So I threw an outer glow on there, give it kind of a hot, red hot or yellow hot glowing color, something like that. And that gives you a pretty cool, dynamic, um, kind of like burning sort of look. And it really looks um, like that object is giving off its own light. And there you can really see it well. And it also looks really cool with the tail. The tail creates this sort of burning, kind of flaming sort of look to it. If you want to incorporate more colors, you can do a gradient for the color instead of just using a single color. You can make any colors you want, obviously. And you can also add noise to it if you like, which gives it that sort of um, rougher sort of look. Um, in this case, I'm just going to go with with the orange here. And that's that. That's my comet. On my original, I sort of created an effect to make it look like the comet was actually hitting the planet here. Um, I did that by simply creating another layer, taking a brush tool, grabbing a color, sort of that orangish kind of yellowish color, and I just created a circle right where the comet is striking. Okay, and then I open up my layer styles here, and I did an outer glow on this as well. So that outer glow, however, I'm going to do a little bit differently. Down here, I want to adjust the contour setting. Um, the default contour is just the straight edge, which is going to give me kind of a perfect circle. I don't really want that. If I choose one of these guys, what I get is kind of a series of rings going out, which is actually exactly what I want. I want to create a look of an explosion sending energy off over the surface of the planet here. So just doing that is a pretty convincing, I think, explosive or impact effect, just like that. Maybe a slightly different color. Maybe I want some more red in there. Nope, I don't want that. Um, Maybe just a hint of orange. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. I could use white, could use blue, yellow, whatever. I'm just gonna go for something about like that, and that's that. I think that looks pretty good. Um, I forgot the one other thing I didn't talk about here is the shadow that I put onto my rings. If the light is shining from a particular direction, the planet is going to cast a shadow onto its own rings. Um, you can create that effect really easily by simply finding your ring layer. Mine is right here. Um, I realize my ring looks a little sloppy right here. Um, Make a new layer directly above the ring, and then clip that layer to the ring layer. So I say create clipping mask. So what I have here now is this layer is my rings, and the layer directly above it is the shadow. If I use a brush now and just paint on that layer, you'll see that that shadow, that color only appears on the rings and does not appear anywhere else. So what I'm going to do is just use a hard edge brush, and I'm just going to paint in where I think that shadow would fall. So if my light source is coming from the upper left, say, or from the front towards the left, maybe my shadow would fall somewhere like that. Let me try that again. I'm going to put my shadow right across there. I realize my spacing doesn't look so hot. There we go. So there is my ring shadow, or I guess it's the planet's shadow, technically. Try that again. There we go. Might want to lower the opacity here just a little bit so you can show through to the rings on the other side, and that's pretty good. That's a pretty good, I think, dramatic effect. Um, all made very easily, very quickly, and very organically using Photoshop's various different layer settings. Now, if I were so inclined, and had I made, let's say, other images earlier, which I did, I could create a little moon here for my planet. So my planet now has its own little moon floating around it. There we go. Now, because I have two layers here, I'm going to go a little smaller. And I'm just going to adjust that glowing effect because clearly that is way too strong for what I want right now. That looks pretty good. I'm going to move my texture around a little bit to get just exactly the look. You know what? I'm unhappy with that. Let's try that again. It's going to come back over here. All right, so I'm going to do this a slightly different way. I've turned off the background of that image, and I'm just going to select it uh, like this using my marquee tool, so I can select the entire area, and then I can do a copy merge, and then I can paste it in. And I'll have just, I don't have to worry about the texture moving around that way. Now I can just shrink this down to give me my moon, and I can place that moon just exactly where I want it, like that. Um, and there you have it. Simple little system. These same basic techniques can be used for lots of different things. I can use this to create um, stars, moons, suns, obviously. Essentially, an infinite variety of planets. Really, anything that you would find floating around in space, I can create using these basic techniques. And that's it. I hope you like that. Thanks.